Sunshine. Welcome to Conversations with Celena, the podcast where we discover inspiration, motivation, and information to help you live your best life. I'm your host, Celena, aka Sunshine, and each week we'll dive into conversations with guests who share their testimonies, insights, and advice. We'll explore topics that uplift, encourage, and empower you to be the best version of yourself you can be. So tune in and let's have some fun while we explore all that life has to offer. Keep it smiling, sunshine, and let's go. Hello there, sunshine. Welcome to another episode of Conversations with Celena. I'm your smiling host, Sunshine, and if this is your first time, we would like to welcome you. If you are returning, you know that Sunshine loves you so much for your continued support. All right, well, you know that this is the place where you get inspiration and information, and tonight we got some information for you. Well, it's also motivation, but it's going to be all of that. It's going to be inspiration, motivation, and information by the time we get finished with you from tonight's episode. So take a moment and just share some more with your friends and family. If you love them, you want to share this episode, okay? So while you're sharing, I just want to say that next month, Conversation with Celena is going to be celebrating 6 years in New Orleans, and please go register if you would like to attend. The seats are limited. It's going to be a very intimate group. The website is selenathomas.net, so go register before all the seats are gone. We're going to have a mini session of I Owe Her and some light snacks. I don't know. They might be even lighter when we finish tonight's episode because the things we had on the menu might not line up after we hear tonight's guest. But it's going to be so informative and it's going to be funny. So you're going to have a good time. Get you some popcorn. I don't know. Let me just not even say that. You might not even be able to have popcorn. I'm drinking some coffee. I'm going to sit back, relax, and I'm going to get some information tonight. So without further ado, I would really like to introduce tonight's guest to you. He is Josh, the lipid guy, better known as Josh Wageman. He is a clinical lipid specialist who practiced clinically in endocrinology. His PhD work focused on cholesterol disturbances and Alzheimer's disease. And although he has a doctorate in physical therapy, he is best known for his role in teaching lipid physiology. He serves as an adjunct professor at several medical programs and is the author of the book, The Home Security System and the Lipid Neighborhood, which aims to bring clarity and hilarity to historically contentious, confusing, and controversial topics. His goal is to help you, whoever you are, not have heart attacks, strokes, and dementia by explaining complicated biochemical concepts in a relatable way. Now tell me, that was a whole mouthful for Sunshine. That was a whole mouthful for Sunshine, and with all that behind his name, I just feel like sitting over here just sipping on my coffee and minding my business. You hear what I'm telling you? So without further ado, y'all welcome to the stage, Josh, the lipid guy.
Thank you so much for that. Wonderful. Thank you. That was great. And man, it is a pleasure to be here. And really all of that to say, we could have condensed that to say that I have very few useful skills except going to school and taking tests. But then after that, hopefully relating those things that I've learned along the way in a manner that people can understand and still be my friend, because man, I need friends. Friends are the best. And I think we have a brimming friendship here tonight. And so this is going to be a great time.
It is going to be an amazing time. And yes, you do have a lot behind your name. And I'm just curious as how you even decided to do all of this schooling with all of these biology and endocrinology and physiology and things that had me over here taking a slow road to reading that bio.
Yeah, all the words that end in ology pretty much condensed into one beautiful, mystifying cornucopia. So really, my first doctorate was in physical therapy, and I firmly believe that God uses even our adverse experiences to catalyze what we're supposed to do when we grow up. And so
Correct.
I had very, very shallow motivations for going to physical therapy school, and PT is a great profession. I practiced as a physical therapist for years as well. And so, but I was actually going to physical therapy school because I still had eligibility to run cross country and track for Idaho State University. And so that was why I went to PT school. If I would have gone to med school at that time or done some other graduate program, I couldn't have run track and cross country. And athletics were my idol, and anything that could be a good thing, which sports are a wonderful thing, right? Fitness is a wonderful thing. But if that becomes a ruling thing in your life rather than the all important relationship with God, then that can potentially be a destructive thing. And so anyway, I got really, really sick, long story short. And at that point, nobody could really figure it out. And I even had to take a medical leave of absence at one point because I got so ill. And during that time, I became infatuated with biochemistry. And I was like, wow, this stuff's really, really interesting. And most people make a lot more sense than what's going on with me. And so during that time, I actually immersed myself in all sorts of wonderful things like endocrinology and biochemistry. And I did finish PT school, but there was never a sense of finality that was what I was supposed to ultimately do long term. And so I went back to the Yale School of Medicine. And at that point, I figured the quickest means to my end to eradicate metabolic derangements from society, or at least help with it, would be to go to physician assistant school rather than med school. And so I went to the Yale School of Medicine for PA school. That was super fun. And I do like school. I mean, like I said, I enjoy going to school. I'm one of those weird guys who would still be going to school, but school is kind of an expensive habit. So now I teach and write books about it. And so anyway, but I went back to Yale School of Medicine, and at one point I had a patient cancel. So I was practicing clinically in endocrinology and seeing patients for all sorts of things, adrenal pathologies, lots of diabetes, other conditions of hormonal dysregulation. And it was a cold January morning, and I was sitting there, and one of my patients canceled, and I'm always reading. I read stuff all the time. And I pulled up an article, and it had this obnoxiously condescending title, something like Basics of Lipids and Lipoproteins. And these are the particles that carry cholesterol in your body. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm pretty good at biochemistry. You know, if I had a motorcycle, I'd name it Krebs. And I thought I was pretty good at that stuff. And so I opened up this article that was supposed to be a rudimentary review of cholesterol homeostasis in the body. And I barely understood any of it, and it made me mad. And so I wish I had a humanitarian reason for becoming a lipid specialist and then subsequently pursuing a PhD on the topic of cholesterol in the brain, which I'm sure we'll get to at some point today. But it's really just because I read an article and it made me mad that I didn't understand it. So anyway, that's why I became a lipid nerd. And fortunately, though, in the process of becoming a lipid nerd, I have learned a lot of things along the way, and hopefully I can use those things that I've been blessed to learn to convey these things to people in a relatable manner for the purpose of not having heart attacks, strokes, and dementia, which none of us want, so that we can ultimately add some life to our years with whatever time the good Lord has given us.
That sounds amazing to me. And the thing about it is that we have to take this information that you're giving us and utilize it, because a lot of us have information. We know some of the things that we're already supposed to do, but it's the doing that kind of gets us in a bottleneck. You know what I'm saying? We know everything, and then we start, maybe some of us, and then we stop. We start and then we stop, or we don't ever implement the information that we've learned. So I was telling you right before we went live that my blood pressure was like 193/123 just a couple weeks ago. And in my ignorance, I guess, I went to the grocery store afterwards because the lady checked it like 4 times. It remained elevated. She didn't seem alarmed, so I didn't seem alarmed either. So I got a call like, where are you? And I said, oh, I'm at the grocery store. The grocery store? Why you not at the ER? And I was like, am I supposed to be? So then I bring the groceries, have my son take me to urgent care. I get to urgent care and they don't even take my blood pressure. They tell me that they're busy. The nurse comes out and she starts asking me, do you have any symptoms like headache, backache, chest ache? I said, well, my head hurts really bad. So she was like, well, just go home. And if anything gets worse, then go to the ER. So I was just really surprised the next day when I went to a different urgent care that the lady was completely appalled that they had allowed me to leave with no one seeming the least bit concerned.
Yeah, and one thing really stood out to me about this story. There's lots of things that were huge red flags in your story, and I'm glad you're okay, and I'm glad we're having this wonderful conversation. However, it was, well, let's just make sure that we'll take care of you if it gets worse, is what you said. And that's a real big problem that we have with Western medicine, is being reactionary. And so one of my goals with the books I write and going on various podcasts and things and teaching at various medical programs is to shift the paradigm in Western medicine from reactionary to preventive. And my framework for shifting that paradigm from reactionary to preventive is what I call the home security system and the lipid neighborhood. Because for everybody who does not want to have heart attacks, strokes, down the line dementia, I want you to have a great metabolic home security system. And I want you to live in a safe lipid neighborhood. And there's 4 pillars actually of that home security system. The first one is normal blood sugar. The second one is, you guessed it, normal blood pressure. That's very, very important. The third one is keep inflammation low. And the fourth one is don't smoke or do drugs, because those are bad. So no matter what your cholesterol panel looks like, those are the axioms. Nobody ever said, my New Year's resolution is to be more insulin resistant. Nope, want to keep those blood sugars normal. Nobody ever said, you know what, I think today would be a great day to have my blood pressure be 240 over 140. That's not okay. Nope, we are really worried about you having a stroke at that point, so nobody ever said that. And life is not better more inflamed than less inflamed. And then drugs are still bad. Don't do those. And so those, no matter what, are going to be axioms. There are very, very few things in biology that you can take to the bank, but those are 4 of them. Okay, so those are the pillars of the home security system. But then your lipid neighborhood, that's your cholesterol panel. Okay, because it's called ApoB containing lipoprotein, and the vast majority of those are LDL particles. And that's historically been called the bad cholesterol. These particles aren't inherently bad, but every LDL particle is potentially a criminal that can infiltrate your arterial abode. Okay, because if it gets in your arterial wall where it doesn't belong, that could be problematic. Additionally, there's something called Lp(a), which I call the felon of the lipid neighborhood. Because even if you have a normal LDL cholesterol, even if you have a good home security system, you can still get broken into if you have the genetic risk factor Lp(a). And I say, hey, you just got to pick the right parent sometimes when it comes to these things. And so, hey, what's your home security system like? How's your blood sugar? How's your blood pressure? Are you inflamed? Are you doing drugs and smoking? Okay, we can look at those things. And then we can look at your cholesterol panel on paper, but people don't live on paper. It can look like you're living in a rough inner city neighborhood on paper, but do we have better ways that can actually inform us of how dangerous your lipid neighborhood is? We do. And so one of my catchphrases is got plaque, get a CAC. What's a CAC? It's a coronary artery calcium score. And I call it the colonoscopy of the heart without the nasty pregame show, because anybody who has ever done a bowel prep for a colonoscopy knows that will temporarily ruin your social life and also potentially wreck your bathroom in the process. It's not super fun. But with this CAC test, all you do is you lay down and it's a low dose CT scan, same amount of radiation as a mammogram, so virtually nothing. And what it tells you is, hey, do you have calcified plaque in your coronary arteries in your heart, or do you not? Because if you do, that's actually a late finding in the process. And what that means is it means there's been a break-in. It means there has been an LDL perpetrator, or perhaps a felon of the lipid neighborhood, Lp(a), break in to your arterial wall. And then that maladaptive immune response has resulted in plaque formation. Well, if you have any plaque in your coronaries, we should know about it, because we have ways to stabilize that plaque and even regress that plaque before it results in having a heart attack or having a stroke, which is what we want to prevent. And so all of these things I go into in lots of detail in the book, but I like to use a lot of metaphors, because if I'm just going off into these complicated biochemical signaling pathways, then nobody's going to want to be my friend anymore. They're just going to nod and be like, oh, wow, I hope this guy stops talking at some point. But if we can actually hopefully use these sorts of metaphors and catchphrases and things like that, then we can hopefully live happily ever after. And one of the reasons I wrote this book is because I was using these metaphors with my own patients. And my patients seemed to be vibing with me and at least pretending to still be my friend. And they were doing really, really well. And we were actually getting ahead of the game when it comes to preventing heart attacks and strokes. And so over time, I just started saying it over and over and over again. And then I was teaching my students it. And somebody told me I should write a book. And I just kind of nodded for a while. And then, eventually I did. And so there it is. And so anyway, but yeah, it's a huge privilege to be involved in the preventive care of folks. And hopefully if we, address these things, then we can prevent these life-changing events, because nobody wants to have a coronary event or a stroke or something like that. Because not only can that prematurely end somebody's life, it really can take a toll on your quality of life as well. And for as long as the good Lord keeps us around, we want to be crushing it.
We want to be crushing it. And I know for me, I was telling you again before we went live, is that we put too much on the healthcare system and the doctors, and we don't educate, ourselves on the things that we can and cannot do, or should and shouldn't do. I mean, some things are obvious, like you said, the smoking and the drugs, but like for the inflammation, you may not know things that you can do to reduce inflammation versus taking a pill. Like there's natural ways to do those, to reduce the inflammation in your body, because that's where the mess all starts, is that inflammation. It just creates all kinds of chaos in your body.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's interesting is there are different tests that we can run to say, hey, are you inflamed or not? Because inflammation is kind of one of these big catchphrases, and a lot of supplement companies will say, oh, this reduces inflammation. And what is this supplement? I don't know, some proprietary blend of various shrubbery fragments and things that somebody dug up from the backyard, and whether or not you're actually getting any of it, no one really knows. But inflammation is there for a reason. And so if we don't have any inflammation when we get some sort of viral infection or bacterial infection, then that's not very good. And so inflammation in the right context, yeah, that's our body's immune response. However, if your immune response resents your chronic state of overnutrition, or it starts attacking your own organs with like a systemic autoimmune disease, then that's inflammation gone rogue. And so all of these things need to be kept in balance. And the most common cause of systemic inflammation, which would mean your whole body's inflamed and is just angry at you. And we can look at this there's a marker called high sensitivity C-reactive protein, so HSCRP. That's a common measure that clinicians will use to say, okay, does this person have a lot of inflammation or not? And the most common reason that is elevated is because of angry adipose. So basically it's fat cells that are releasing these sorts of inflammatory mediators. And if we can actually shift our metabolic state to one that's a little bit healthier and less insulin resistant, a lot of times we will see that marker HSCRP decrease accordingly. And so when your inflammatory response, instead of attacking foreign invaders, is attacking you, then that can be rather problematic. And so in chapter 3 of my book, we talk about some ways to address that and how to actually restore insulin sensitivity, which is a big, big key with all of these sorts of things that can result in cardiovascular disease if we don't get ahead of the game on it.
So what is an example? Like, I feel like I stay inflamed some type of way. I don't know, maybe the fluid, like I have fluid, and I told you I have severe peripheral neuropathy. And I noticed that when I eat less, the inflammation and the fluid goes down automatically. And I have all these little droppers. I know there's a name for it, but I don't know what the name of it is. You know how the little syringe that sucks in the medicine and you put it under your tongue?
Yeah.
So
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I heard someone say like the real name of that, and I wanted to repeat it, but I have no clue what it is. But I have like about 10 of these. I have magnesium, I have sea moss, and as you were talking, I was like, oh God, they done went in the backyard and got all this stuff and put it in this. And I don't even know what I'm taking, because I know the other day when my blood pressure was elevated, there was this one that I had just started taking, and it had like cinnamon and berberine and all these,
Mhm.
all
Yeah,
the names on it.
yeah.
You don't know what you're taking. You really don't. So I think I'm gonna back up off of all of it and just take what I'm supposed to take, or I don't know, look in your book and see what you recommend, because I know there's some reputable companies out there where you can take supplements that will help you along this health journey, because you can't get everything from the food. It
Sure.
just it's depleted. The food is depleted. And so it's like, what do you do to have a balance of your food and your supplements and your exercise in
Mhm.
order to live this life that you're talking about?
Yeah, yeah. And so with all the supplements a lot of times just end up making you have really expensive urine, And so but some of them actually do have some utility. And so like Ceylon cinnamon and berberine that you mentioned, those do have some modest effect on lowering blood sugar. Okay, that's good. And whenever I say lowering blood sugar, a lot of times I will interchangeably use that with restoring insulin sensitivity. And I think it would be worthwhile to spend just a couple minutes on restoring insulin sensitivity before I go into a few more things about lifestyle and how we can hopefully address all of the pillars of our home security system just by being less insulin resistant. And so insulin is a storage hormone. Okay. So a lot of people are familiar with insulin because if you have type 1 diabetes, then your body doesn't make insulin. And your pancreas is the organ that typically makes insulin. And so with type 1 diabetes, usually this is diagnosed when you're young. And you'll have kids coming in and they are very, 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 very frail and skinny, and their blood sugars are 500, 600, and they're not doing well because their body doesn't make any insulin. And so once you give them insulin, then they get better and their blood sugar goes down. And so most people are familiar that, oh, okay, insulin lowers blood sugar. But really, why does it lower blood sugar? It's because insulin is a storage hormone. And so basically all your cells are like little suitcases. And if insulin's around, then it can store the glucose into your suitcases. It can be uptaken into the muscle cell, so it can be used instantly, or it can be stored in your suitcases, which are like your fat cells. But unfortunately, over time, if there's too much insulin around, because, well, we're eating and we don't need to be eating more and more and more and more and more, well, insulin still comes along, but those suitcases are full. And so insulin recruits more strong insulin friends to shove more clothes in that packed out suitcase, but it's not fitting. So what happens is insulin drapes those clothes that it should be shoving in your suitcases around your pancreas, around your liver, around your heart. And then you get this fat accumulation around your organs. And when fat accumulates around your organs, it makes your whole body inflamed because fat isn't supposed to be around your organs. And so the solution is, well, let's undrape the clothes from your liver and pancreas and heart, and let's take the clothes out of the suitcases rather than giving you more and more and more insulin, which would be like somebody with type 2 diabetes who still makes insulin. It just doesn't use the insulin very well. That it used to be an approach to give them even more insulin to lower their blood sugars, but that is just a Band-Aid on the overall problem. And so this is why any intervention that results in caloric restriction. Sometimes people will use intermittent fasting. A lot of times people will use a lower carbohydrate type diet. These sorts of interventions can help people who are struggling with insulin resistance and or high blood sugars get their blood sugar and their insulin a little bit more under control. And one of my catchphrases is control your insulin, control your life, because no insulin is type 1 diabetes, and that's incompatible with life. But too much insulin is actually one of the big drivers of a lot of chronic disease in our country. So like most things, there is a sweet spot. And when it comes to cardiovascular disease, well, a lot of these particles, these LDL particles that could potentially result in them being criminals, well, their job is to be mailmen and deliver the mail, which are triglycerides, and then go home to the liver at the end of the day. But what if your mailboxes are full? Well, the mailmen are trying to deliver the mail, but they're trying to use that insulin access card, but they can't deliver the mail. So what do? They're driving around, not delivering the mail, and they just might drive their trucks into your artery wall. Additionally, people who have elevated blood sugars, so let's say they have diabetes, it's hard to drive in a storm. And basically, the mailmen are trying to drive around in a sugar storm. Well, I know at one point I lived the song Jesus Take the Wheel. I got caught in a blizzard and I rolled my car a couple times. It was terrifying. And so better to listen to the song, but not actually have to live it. Well, all these mailmen who are trying to drive through a sugar storm, they're trying to deliver the mail and the mailboxes are full and then they're in a blizzard and oh man, yeah, they're going to run their trucks in your arterial wall. And this is why people who have type 2 diabetes have a 2 to 4-fold increased risk of having cardiovascular disease. It's because the mailmen are more apt to break in. And so we want to mitigate all these things. And a lot of these things will go a lot better if we can restore insulin sensitivity, if we can get better control of our blood sugars. It's going to help a lot as far as even the inflammation, as far as even the blood pressure component. And then it's going to help those mailmen, which are the cholesterol-laden particles, actually deliver the mail like they should instead of getting into traffic wrecks. And so a lot goes into this, of course. And sometimes people get annoyed with me because they're like, well, okay, you said all this stuff and, we want the mailmen to do their job and we definitely don't want to be insulin resistant, all of these things. But it's like, so how do we do this, Josh? And I'll be like, all right, wait for it. You're going to be skeptical of all these letters behind my name. Sleep, move, don't eat junk, lather, rinse, repeat every day for the rest of your life. I'm like, darn it, that's not what I wanted. I just wanted to take a pill or I wanted some magical mushroom of some sort, or I don't know. But really that's it. Now, here's the thing. That is easy for me to say, but how do we get there? And the way that I can help somebody sleep, move, and don't eat crap is maybe going to be a little different than the next person. And so thankfully, I've been doing this my whole life. Wonderful. Praise God. But let's say somebody comes to me, and I've had patients. I had a guy who came to me, type 2 diabetes. He was on 420 units of insulin, but he still made his own insulin, and his average blood sugars were still in the 300s. Well, I didn't just say, hey, dude, just move, sleep better and just try harder. No, that's insensitive and terrible. What did I do? Well, we talked it over. I gave him a specific dietary plan. I used one of the medications that can help catalyze that shift to a sustainable lifestyle. And guess what? That guy was able to get off all his insulin. He was able to lower his blood sugars back to the pre-diabetic range. He was able to lose 60 pounds and he was getting back to riding his bike with his wife for the first time in years. And he felt like he was a better husband, a better father, and a better friend. That's awesome. And so sometimes it requires a catalyst. Sometimes it requires some helpful medications to get you on your way and to help shift to that lifestyle, which is sleep, move, don't eat crap. So that's always the answer, but how we get there might be a little bit different person to person. And so, but it is wonderful when you're able to help people get back to that point. And man, life is pretty fun when you're able to go out there and do stuff. And I always say that God gave us minds to learn and he gave us bodies to move. Hey, let's keep on doing both those things for as long as he keeps it around. And I think that we're actually going to have a lot of life in our years when we're able to do those things.
You see, I had to put that up on the screen so we could all see sleep, move, and don't eat crap. I don't even sleep like I'm supposed to. And I know that's a hormonal thing right now. So I can't wait for you to get to that point over there. I feel like maybe I have like extremely high cortisol levels or something, menopause, a combination of all of it, just being over 50 and still trying to sleep, move, and not eat crap. That's what I'm working on.
Yeah, that sleep pillar is really fascinating to me too, because it takes a long time of not moving and subsequently and concurrently also eating crap in order to get to prediabetes and diabetes and those things. It takes a long time, right? But with sleep, it's actually, if you aren't sleeping adequately, it's the quickest way to insulin resistance and dysfunctional metabolism. And one of my favorite studies is they took these 20-something-year-old kids who were in college and they were at the height of their mitochondrial powers. They did something called an oral glucose tolerance test, which is a test that's a little more sophisticated than the hemoglobin A1C and some of the other tests that we use to say, hey, are your blood sugars elevated? They weren't. They were perfect. No insulin resistance whatsoever. And they took half of this group, young kids, and they had them sleep less than 4 hours a night. And they took the other half and they said, hey, just sleep as much as you want. After 5 days, only 5 days, half of the group that was sleep deprived had levels consistent with prediabetes on that repeat oral glucose tolerance test. 5 days. And so, I mean, it takes a long time to screw yourself up in other ways. And it only takes 5 days if you're getting inadequate sleep. And that's the importance of rest. And that's what's funny about sleep too, is it's passive. You know, anybody who's ever said, you know what, I'm going to try really hard to get good sleep tonight. How's that work out for you? Right. You're tossing and turning, you know, you just got to let go. And at the end of my book, I talk about what I believe is a profound parallel to spiritual wellness and the concept of metabolic health as far as sleep goes, and as far as that spiritual parallel to our rest being in the one who lived the sinless life you and I never could, died the criminal's death we deserve, and then defeated the power of sin and death on the cross. And so anyway, I think it's a beautiful thing, and sleep is just so important. And so, and that said though, hey, there are different issues that can result in not being able to sleep. And you know, the menopausal transition is cruel for many reasons, and sometimes that can be an issue during that time. Cortisol levels are an interesting topic, and cortisol is another one of those sweet spot hormones where if it's too high, then that's going to be problematic. But if it's too low, then that's also incompatible with life. So that's an interesting topic as well. Most of these things are that way. Darn it. It's not like, oh, let's lower this or let's increase this. It's like, well, it kind of depends, you know, and outside of extreme pathology, cortisol is a hard one to regulate when it comes to any sort of medication. And so that's an interesting thing too. But at the end of the day, hey, if we can do what we can to get that delicious sleep, and sleeping's amazing. I love it. And if we can actually move, and move would be a combination of aerobic exercise and resistance exercise. You know, heavy weights aren't going to pick themselves up, and nobody ever said, I wish I was weaker. So it's important to preserve that muscle mass, especially as we age. And then also, you know, when I say don't eat crap, people are like, well, what do you mean by that? You know, and what I say is there are multiple dietary strategies that can help your home security system and get you living in a safe lipid neighborhood. The standard American diet is just not one of them. There's a reason why that acronym standard American diet is SAD, because it leads to a sad metabolic state. And so my general rule is prioritize protein, eat real food. And intuitively, you know, when you drive through Krispy Kreme, you're not thinking, yep, today I am really crushing it. I am making a really good health choice here. That New Year's resolution is more Krispy Kreme. Probably not, you know. So I think intuitively we are pretty aware of when this is a refined process thing that's not really doing anything for us except making our blood sugar sky high. And if we're actually, you know, eating something that is from the outer aisle of the grocery store or is high in protein. And so it looks like we have some questions from the chat. It says, how do you block an over assumption of cortisol? And I know I just saw that flash up, but hey, it's as good a time as any to talk about this, right? Because we are live. So cortisol is interesting. So, so now you got me started. I coach cross country and track, and one of the track kids asked me about cortisol on our run the other day. And so, yes, we were talking about the biochemistry of the adrenal glands while on a run. Isn't that the dream? So anyway, so cortisol is produced by your adrenal glands, and your adrenal glands are on top of your kidneys. So you got your kidneys, and then on top of your kidneys are your adrenal glands. And there are 4 layers of your adrenal glands, and it's the second layer called the zona fasciculata that produces cortisol. And so cortisol is often called the stress hormone. You know, it's like, oh, I'm stressed, my cortisol is high. And that is true. But if someone doesn't make any cortisol, it's called Addison's disease. And so this would be an autoimmune attack on your adrenal glands. And so you don't produce any cortisol. And that's actually incompatible with life. And if you don't actually take exogenous cortisol, which would be hydrocortisone, then you're going to die, actually. And so what's interesting is President John F. Kennedy had Addison's disease, and he was on cortisol replacement, which would be glucocorticoids, his whole life. And then you also have to take mineralocorticoids as well. So that's not good. You don't want too low a cortisol because that's incompatible with life. But conversely, people who have too high of cortisol, and that's pathological, meaning this is a disease state, it's called Cushing's. And so I don't know if anybody out there who's listening to this has seen the old Sonic the Hedgehog games where there's Eggman. The villain is Eggman or Dr. Robotnik. And he's like this super egg-shaped dude, but he's like super skinny in his arms and legs. That's what people who have Cushing's tend to look like. Not all of them, but that's the classic, what we call phenotype, or the characteristics that we observe when people have too much cortisol that's being secreted. Because if you're producing that stress hormone all the time, then it leads to increased truncal obesity, but then it wastes away your other muscles. And a lot of times those people struggle big time to sleep, because cortisol is supposed to be highest in the morning to kind of get you going, get you out of bed, and then it's lowest at night. And so cortisol is actually not the enemy in normal physiology, just like most of these things. However, when cortisol is high and it remains high all day, you can't shut down. And so people who have Cushing's or who have too much cortisol are often tired but wired. And a lot of times they don't sleep well at all, because instead of actually being low so that you can just nice, chill, go to bed, they're up all night because your body thinks it's running away from the tiger, but the tiger is within. And people who have Cushing's, they either have a tumor on their adrenal glands that are making them produce too much cortisol, or they have a tumor in their brain on their pituitary gland that is making them produce too much cortisol. There are some other rare causes of what's called ectopic Cushing's, but those people usually don't make it too long, unfortunately. So anyway, so that's pathology. Now, here's the thing. Let's say that you or I are going through a stressful time. Well, probably our cortisol is high when it should be low, and maybe it's low when it should be high, but it's not something that we can just throw a pill at or do a surgery for. The real solution is whatever's stressing you out, how can we manage that? And that's also an answer that's not very popular. And some people will be like, oh, take ashwagandha or rhodiola or holy basil or holy cow or whatever, any of these supplements. Honestly, that's like, trying to douse a forest fire with a squirt gun. It's really addressing the thing that is dysregulating the cortisol production that's going to actually help the issue. And so it's a tricky one. And of course, these things happen. Life gets stressful. Life gets hard. Life is messy. But that's why we need each other. That's why we need support systems. That's why we need the good Lord above. And God puts people in each other's lives in order to support us. And you need just these good people in your corner to help get through those rough times, because anybody who says that God doesn't give you something that you can't handle is wrong and has never been completely at the end of their rope and shattered. God does give us things that are way too much for us to handle, but it's during those times that we learn to trust him, and he puts people in our lives to help carry us through when we can't do it on our own. And so anyway, it's really important that we are able to support each other and just go on and hopefully help each other live as best as we can. Oh boy. Wow. And so there's another question here. It says, what would you say the biggest takeaway from all of this is, to sum it up in a few sentences? Oh boy. Well, there's a lot I had to say, particularly about the cholesterol component. That's why I have to write books about this stuff. But basically, I would say that home security system in that lipid neighborhood, as far as metabolic health, hey, normal blood sugar, normal blood pressure, keep inflammation low, don't smoke. Okay, you can take those to the bank. And then, hey, as far as being preventive for cardiovascular disease, most people just rely on their cholesterol panel. Get a CAC. Got plaque, get a CAC. That CAC, that coronary artery calcium score, it's super cheap. And it tells you, hey, have you been broken into? And if you have, we don't need to just wait around for you to have a heart attack. We can actually do things so that you never do. And so that's huge on the preventive aspect of what goes on. But also, we do need those support systems. Honestly, I'm Christian, saved by the grace of God. I, will totally say that, even with Christ in your life, it's a sin cursed world, but without him, man, I can't imagine not having him guiding me through these times. And so anyway, we need support systems. We really, ultimately, my dad told me growing up, Josh, there's only two things that matter: love God, love people. And then whatever you're doing, there's going to be the outflow of those two important things. Not much else matters. And all the things that we are able to do and all the opportunities we have, I've been so blessed to have so many opportunities, but at the end of the day, it's really just a manifestation of that. So love God, love people, and then go do whatever it is you do and be a steward of the faculties that he has given you. And what I try to do is just give it back, and my book's The Home Security System and the Lipid Neighborhood. And so kind of looks like that. My wife designed the cover because she's awesome. And so anyway, that's what I try to do. And really, the greatest blessing of all is just meeting so many cool people on this journey. One of my favorite sayings is, when God gives a gift, he wraps it in a person. And, you can't put a price on those friendships. So anyway, lots of tangents right there. But at the end of the day, I hope I come across as genuine, and I am always happy to hopefully help anybody who's out there if they reach out to me with their metabolic health, with their cardiovascular health, or if you just need a friend to talk to.
Josh, hold your book up long enough. I'm going to take my stuff back off.
That's it. Then The Home Security System and the Lipid Neighborhood. And it's just on Amazon. If you just search that on Amazon, it's on there. And, most people have fun with it. People say, I never thought I'd laugh so much reading a book about cholesterol, but laughter is the best medicine still a lot of times. And so anyway, I try to bring clarity and hilarity to what has historically been a very misunderstood and contentious topic. And what's tough about cholesterol is you'll have some influencer, some guy who has six-pack abs, which is fine to have six-pack abs. That's okay. But he'll say something about cholesterol, and maybe it has a little bit of truth to it, and maybe it has a lot of things that are wrong. And then you'll have some cardiologist over here, and maybe what he says is accurate, and maybe it's not. And so there's a lot of things that are misunderstood. And I went to the Yale School of Medicine, and really what's taught historically in programs, even really good ones, is LDL bad, HDL good, everybody take a statin. And there is so much more to it than that. And so I try to dispel some of those misconceptions with what I go into in the book. And like I said before, LDL is not inherently bad. It's called the bad cholesterol. No, it's not inherently bad. It's a mailman. But if that mailman runs his trucking arterial wall, that's a bad mailman. We need to address the corrupt workforce. And then HDL good. Well, HDL, they call it the good cholesterol. And HDL does some good things. It is able to actually go into the scene of a crime in the arterial wall and pull the cholesterol-laden perpetrator out and run it back to the liver before it causes mischief. That's a good thing. HDL is actually capable of binding up lipopolysaccharide, which are some toxins released from bacterial infections, and it can actually bind those up and actually save your life when you're trying to die on you. So that's a good charitable community activity. It can even help in using glucose in your skeletal muscle, which is always good. So HDL has good things going on with it, but just looking at your measure of HDL cholesterol on a blood panel gives you no idea of if it's good or bad or not. HDL is kind of like the police force, but just looking at your roster, the names on your roster, which would be like your HDL cholesterol on your lipid panel, doesn't give you any idea whether it's actually doing what it's supposed to. And so there are many people with high HDL cholesterol that have a lot of cardiovascular disease. There are a lot of people with low HDL cholesterol that get cardiovascular disease too, because low HDL cholesterol happens when people are insulin resistant. Because what happens is when people have high triglycerides, because their mailboxes are full around the clock, a lot of times their HDL particles get kind of fat and fluffy with all the triglycerides. And so in the attempted procedure to remove those, your body overshoots it, and then you're left with a skinny, gaunt, emaciated HDL particle that can't pass its fitness test because it's too weak. And so over time, your body takes it out of circulation. And so low HDL cholesterol is associated with cardiovascular disease, but not because we know what the HDL cholesterol is doing. It's just because it's another sign of insulin resistance. but there's some variation with various ethnicities there too. And so HDL cholesterol, don't rely on it to say, oh, I'm invincible, or oh, I'm in trouble. You know, we still need to do things beyond the basic lipid panel, like that coronary artery calcium score. And then statins, statins are also one of those really contentious topics. And some people, blame all the existential problems of the world on statins, and other people say they should be on the drinking water. And both of those views are ridiculous. Statins do some good things, and then they also do some things that we don't love. And so it's just important to say, hey, be honest about what they do, what they don't do. And I go into that in one of the chapters in my book. And then also there are therapies that are not statins that can actually help people reduce cardiovascular events, that if you have plaque in your coronary arteries, can help stabilize those plaques and then even lead to plaque regression. And so what's nice is when it was the year 2004, people would say, all right, well, let's pray and take a statin, if they had a lot of plaque in their coronaries. I think we should always pray, but we have lots of tools in our toolbox now that aren't statins that can actually help reduce cardiovascular events. And so it's a good time to be in the preventive cardiology space when it comes to the point where potentially you may need a medication to help the process that has started to put out that fire in your arteries. What is the major negative of statins? It's a great question. So I'm going to start off. Statins do some good things. So if you have any plaque in your arteries, do you want that plaque stable or unstable? Well, I'd probably go with stable, because 2/3 of heart attacks actually happen in a blood vessel that doesn't have a ton of occlusion. So it's not super narrowed. It's just vulnerable, and then it ruptures, and then you're 100% occluded. And so knowing that, we want to stabilize any plaque. So if we've identified plaque with maybe that CAC, that coronary artery calcium score, which isn't a perfect test, but it's a real good one. You can't identify soft plaque, but it shows that there's been a breaking. But if we have any plaque in our coronaries, we want it stable. Statins do stabilize plaque, and they will lower your LDL cholesterol also. Okay, so statins do some things that are not bad, and they do have a lot of data in reducing cardiovascular events, particularly in very high-risk people. Now, the things that we don't love are going to be, they can potentially lead to muscle aches, which is very common, and that's a real effect, actually. And they can also lead to worsening blood sugars. And, I really prioritize insulin sensitivity. I don't want your blood sugars to be worse. But really, all the side effects that we see with statins, they're what we call dose dependent. So as you go up and up and up in statin dose is where you get more side effects. And so, full disclosure, I prescribe lots of statins because I am a clinician, right? Now, there are other ways to play the game, but my approach, outside of someone had just had a heart attack when the data is there for higher doses of statins, is to do a very low dose of a statin in combination with other things. Because when you decrease cholesterol synthesis with a statin, your body's smart and increases its absorption. Well, how do you decrease absorption? There's a medication called ezetimibe, which really has no side effects, that will decrease absorption. So if you use those two in combination with one another, you're going to minimize the side effects of the statin, and you're going to get living in a safer lipid neighborhood. Okay. But, if you have a coronary artery calcium score of 0 and you're 55 years old, do you need any of these medications? Doesn't seem that way. And so we always have to just do our diligence when it comes to identifying the right person who might even be having a conversation about these medications. Additionally, there is a class of medication called PCSK9 inhibitors. And PCSK9, it stands for proprotein convertase subpsilocin kexin type 9. And when you can rattle that off without sounding like you're going to throw up, you've reached a special place of enlightenment in the lipid world. But basically what that does is it puts your LDL receptor out of commission if it's around in too much quantity. And the LDL receptor is like one of those claw grabbers at the arcade, where you go to the arcade and you try to win your kid the stuffed animal. And that's how you clear these particles from your body. It goes out, pulls in the ApoB particle, like you're winning the little Apo bear, and then goes back out hundreds of times. But if that PCSK9 is around, it puts your claw grabber out of order. And then, can't win the stuffed animal. And what's happening? Kids want to win the stuffed animal. Kids are not patient. Kids are crying. Kids are getting your artery wall, causing heart disease. And so if you inhibit PCSK9, which puts your claw grabber out of order, basically you're just enhancing clearance of the system. And it's a pretty slick way to get living in a safer lipid neighborhood if there's been a break-in. So there's some other medications too that potentially can be useful in the right context, the right time. That's kind of a deep dive, but that's a little bit of intro there. But I think just being smart about our tools in the toolbox, knowing when and how to use them is important, especially for the clinicians, because we're really not taught this in school. And as you just saw, there's a lot to it. But at the end of the day, I think that it's important just to identify things, because you can't treat what you don't know about. And so that's why I love this, especially this coronary artery calcium score, this CAC. It's such an easy test, super cheap. And, if you've been broken into, this should lead us to have a conversation about living in a safer lipid neighborhood so that you don't keep getting broken into and have the big one. And so, because that's where, that's what we want to do to shift the paradigm to prevention. And so, the name again of the book is The Home Security System and the Lipid Neighborhood. And all of these links to these books are on that website that's at the bottom of the screen, the lifelovelipids.com. And I write a lot. Writing's cathartic for me. I fancy myself as some sort of artist with a linguistic tapestry. And so my daughter likes reading the articles I post on lifelovelipids.com. And what I say is, if I can make you laugh a little, learn a little, wax nostalgic, think about things, and then all of those things are worth doing. And so most of what I post on there is actually not lipid related. When I have so much to say about lipids that I write books about it, and then I get that out of my system, and then I write a lot of other stuff that hopefully just makes you smile. So anyway, so you can check that out, and all the book links are on there as well. My buddy's awesome, and he built me a website one day just because he felt like it. And it's just free. So go ahead, and hopefully somebody enjoys it out there.
Putting it up there.
Oh, there it is. That is wonderful.
Let's see. Why did you decide to write this book?
Yeah, so I was using all these metaphors that I use, and there's pictures in the book. My daughter loves the pictures in there. So anyway, and just to help people have a better understanding of some pretty complicated stuff. And when I get going, people are like, whoa, this guy needs to settle down. But this stuff's complicated, and that's why they just gloss over it even in med schools, because it's like, oof, do we really want to talk about all this? Well, some of it you need to, in order to do a better job when it comes to preventive care. But anyway, so I had used this for years with my patients. I had used it with the medical students that I had taught. I have used it with my colleagues at work, because I teach lipids to my work colleagues. And there were a lot of people over the years who said, dude, you just got to write a book. You got to write a book. And then enough people said it. And then I had too much time on my hands over Christmas break one year that I sat down and wrote it. And so it had all been kind of percolating in my head for a long time, and just put it down, and there you have it. And so what's kind of funny too is the Home Security System in the Lipid Neighborhood, the first edition, is the one that everybody should get. There is also a remixed second edition for the clinician and anyone on a mission for more lipid tuition, because sometimes I'm compelled to rap about these things. And that is about twice as thick. And that's for people who want to be clinical lipidologists, who want to study for the lipid board exam, who want to go even deeper into the weeds on some of this stuff, which is probably about 14 people worldwide. And so I don't recommend that you out there who are listening to this get that one. I would get the first one, because that's how you're still going to be my friend, I think. But that's for the people who really want to generally be physicians or other healthcare practitioners who are taking the lipid board exam and really immerse themselves even further into some of the deep weeds. And it's important when you do get into the deep weeds, you're able to get out. And I want the best for all of you. So get the first edition.
So I have a question. I think I have two questions. I'm also putting what you just said. So after all of this information, what would be a good question outside of asking for this particular, because this is a test, right?
Yeah, the CAC. Yep.
The Okay, so if I was to go to the doctor, since we want to do preventive, I haven't been diagnosed with pre-diabetes, diabetes, high blood. I don't have any of that, right? So I don't want to wait and be reactive.
Yeah.
I want to be proactive. And so I want to make a doctor's appointment after this episode. Let me call the doctor. And because they didn't see this episode, what do I communicate to them so that they don't miss? You know what I mean? Like, I know what I'm looking for because you just told me what I need to be looking for, but I want to be able to effectively communicate that to them. So, what is the first step in this doctor's visit that I need to ask them to? So, because I want a full blown everything.
For sure.
Like, I want to be preventive because I'm 54 and I want to live long and make the most out of my life. So what do I do?
So you walk in with this book and you give it, actually some people do that. And what I think is important is to have a practitioner who listens to you, and no one cares how much you know till they know how much you care. And if unfortunately, there's a lot of egos, in medicine, and people, a patient will ask them for a test and they'll be like, oh, that's ridiculous or something. But a lot of times just they don't know about it. And so that's unfortunate when that gets in the way of optimal patient care. And so a lot of times people will just go in and say, hey, I was reading this book or I was listening to a podcast or whatever it was. And they will just go in and ask. They will ask for a CAC. And that's totally great. And if the clinician doesn't know it, then, hey, you've got an opportunity to help them out there. And then there's a couple other tests I really like. A fasting insulin. So a lot of times you go and you get some blood work and they get it fasting. Fasting insulin is really important because if your insulin, a lot of times your blood sugar will be normal, but if your insulin levels are high, that tells you, we're starting to get insulin resistant. And then that can help us modify whatever you're doing dietarily and lifestyle. And so I'm a big fan of a fasting insulin. And then for the lipid neighborhood component, there's something called LP(a). And so LP(a) is that felon of the lipid neighborhood. And that's an independent risk factor for cardiovascular disease, meaning you can have everything else normal and you can still have break-ins. My friend was totally fit guy and had elevated LP(a) as his only risk factor. And his CAC was 2,814. And he had to have a 5-vessel bypass. And so just knowing about the felon of the lipid neighborhood is also a good thing. And so the really low hanging fruit for everybody who is going to go get their annual wellness check is in midlife. Now, if you're a 12-year-old kid, don't get a CAC, and CAC is not useful in really young people, but, especially the 40 and up crowd, a CAC is a wonderful test. Got plaque, don't know, get a CAC. And then the fasting insulin and LP(a) would be my big 3 that everybody should get. And then there's other things in my book I talk about that, depending on the context, can be useful there too. But those are the big 3. And so, yeah. How much calcium should a 70-year-old have? I would assume calcium in the arteries or just dietary calcium. I'm not sure. They're probably calcium in the arteries. If you have, there are percentiles. When you get a CAC, there will be age percentiles of where it shows you, where you stand compared to the general population. What I will say is 300, the absolute score of 300 on a CAC, no matter what age you are, you have equivalent risk of having a heart attack, even over the short term, as people who have had prior heart attacks. And so 300 is like, whoa, we better really do something about this. Dietary calcium. I prefer to get dietary calcium from your food. The data on actually supplementing with calcium isn't amazing. And you can only handle about 500 milligrams at a time if you are supplementing with calcium. And so don't go over that. And so I prefer, generally to get it from food if you're able to. But it just kind of depends on the context. Sometimes there's different recommendations if people have osteoporosis or osteopenia. But as always, I prefer to get things from food if we're able to.
So speaking of food, because you had said earlier, like make protein the first thing, like make sure that we're targeting in on protein first. So what would be a good source of protein? And then you also said to eat real food.
Yep.
What is that?
So not Krispy Kreme, not whatever is at the, local, I don't know. Most of these things, there aren't Dorito packages that are imported from Malaysia or something, that is not real food. But as far as,
I love Dorito.
yeah. Hey, so I always meet people where they're at. Quest chips. There's something called Quest chips, and they're protein chips.
They're protein.
Those are better, and they taste like Doritos. Those are better than Doritos. And so now, ideally, what's a good source of protein? Salmon, chicken, beef, cottage cheese, Greek yogurt. I think I eat more Greek yogurt than anyone on the planet. So those are really good protein sources. And then, real food. There's an apple, blueberries, strawberries, and vegetables, your broccoli, cauliflower, sweet potato, the real food. And so things that it doesn't have 9,000 ingredients on there, and most of them are various derivatives of plastic, so like Elizabeth says, anything close to coming from the earth.
Yes. And so the reason that I asked that is, like, right now I have some watermelon, right? Don't have one seed in it. And so, things that's real are not really real anymore. So it is difficult to just go in the grocery store and purchase real food. Now, you don't even know anymore if it's really real. Even the apples have this little gloss over them and look perfect, and that an apple should not be still good in 5 months, but it's still sitting there looking like a
for sure. So and the context matters, right? If somebody actually has type 2 diabetes, I actually don't encourage them to eat like bananas or things like that, just because they already have a problem with their handling sugars of any kind. And so we can kind of lose your carb privileges for a little bit while we reverse your diabetes, because it is reversible. So anyway, so the context matters, but in general, even if the apple is a little glossier than normal, it's still going to be better than a Dorito. So anyway, that's kind of the short version there.
I thought you was gonna hammer Krispy Kreme. I'm just like, poor Krispy Kreme. I love Krispy Kreme when the light is on.
Yeah, they're not going to be sponsoring my book, I'll tell you that.
No, they're not. But oh my goodness. You say the light is on and they're hot. Oh my gosh. Let's take a beeline over to Krispy Kreme. I haven't had it in years though. So, but you kept hammering on them. So
yeah, well, hey, that's okay. We might have to just do a round 2, just to so I can, make reparations to Krispy Kreme.
And then my other question, because that was the real food. I do know that I want to try to back up off of meat and not have so much meat. That was the reason that I was asking specifically the protein question, but not salmon. Like, I'll still eat the salmon, but I wanted to try to give my body a break from trying to process, beef and some of the heavier meats.
Yeah, it just kind of depends. And so, some people just don't do as well, with various types of interventions. In general, I don't think meat is the enemy. I think refined processed carbohydrates do a lot more metabolic damage. Right. And there was a recent study that showed that, even red meat didn't worsen people's blood sugars at all, and you wouldn't expect it to, And so I think that some of these things have been demonized a little bit, but nobody's going to say, oh yeah, Krispy Kremes and Doritos are going to be our best bet for our dietary menu. Then Elizabeth has a question. Are all types of diabetes reversible? Type 1 diabetes is not reversible. It's manageable. But if you're still making insulin, as far as type 2 diabetes, that is reversible. There are some other unusual flavors of diabetes that are kind of in between type 1 and 2, and those are manageable as well. But it just kind of depends.
So give us a day in Josh, the lipid guy's day. What does that look like? If you said, this is what I do on a daily basis. I get up at this time. I drink water, I on. Like, give us a little example of what your day looks like.
Oh, okay. And I'm a little weird, and I apologize for this, Celena. Can I real quick run to the restroom? I'm struggling. I'm on the struggle bus, and so I really apologize.
So while you're on the struggle bus, we'll go to commercial break, and we'll
Yes, let's go on a commercial because I apologize.
No, you're fine. Hang tight, my sunshine. Conversations with Celena. We'll be right back. Hey, sunshine. All right, we are back, and let's see. While we're waiting on Josh to return, I just want to remind you all that next month is going to be Conversation with Celena's 6-year anniversary. So be sure to go to the website and register if you would like to attend. It's going to be a small, intimate group. If you would like to be a sponsor, we already have like the Blood Blocked It. We have the Taste of Juanita. We also have like just collaboration with, I'm going to say it's Dylan Designs, TL Media. So just come on over on the next episode. I will definitely be able to run everyone down. If you would like to be a sponsor of someone, like provide a scholarship for someone who would want to attend and that's not able to, you can find all of that on the website. So I am so excited about it because, so many times, you want to throw in the towel, but I'm thankful for the people that are here to encourage and to stand by me and with me to say, sunshine, the world needs you. So here I am still showing up after 6 years and pat myself on the back. So I hope that that's an encouragement to someone else. Like, even when you feel tired and you want to do like this, take care of your health. That's what we're here for, to teach you ways to be preventive in the healthcare industry and not reactive in the healthcare industry, where we got to run to the doctors for everything. You're able to take care of yourself. You're able to ask the right questions. And then you're able to walk in your purpose and do the things that you feel like that God has put in you to do, because you can't do any of it if you don't have your health. So health is truly wealth. So I think Josh is back. Bring him back on up to the stage.
We are good. We are good.
Yes, you're funny. I was just talking about the people that's in my life that has encouraged me to stay the course, Yeah. And you talked about relationships. So how important would you say relationships are whenever it comes to your health?
Oh, massive. And so from a clinical study standpoint, even there's something called the Copenhagen Heart Study. And the sports that are actually, and the activities, I should say, that are associated with the greatest longevity and the least likelihood of having cardiovascular events are racket sports, like pickleball, like tennis, like racquetball, even golf is up there. And golf is up there even higher than some of the more aerobic based sports. And so it's interesting. And there's unquantifiable social component to where you're going out there, you're with your friends, and there's accountability there too, and you show up and, your pickleball partner's not gonna be able to play if you're not there, so you keep showing up and you're having fun. And a lot of those activities too, you're doing dynamic movements, crossing midline, getting out of the sagittal plane, and you're having fun together. And I think that that's a huge, huge element that we can't really measure with any sort of blood work or anything like that. And, if you're going to your like Zumba class, and you're having fun together, you're dancing, you're moving, you're just, exploring the gift to the rhythm that you're doing, and so it's really, really cool. And that sense of community too, if you're going through something and you got friends in your corner, especially from even a mental health standpoint, you need people that you can talk to, because if you are bottling up your frustrations, then it's going to be kind of like mold, and it's just fermenting and growing in a dark place. And then it just kind of perpetuates this nasty cycle you're in. And so when you're able to purge the nastiness and from your life, and able to talk about things, it leads to just you're able to move on from whatever you're dealing with. And so I think in so many different ways, having that sense of community and having people who love you for you, you don't have to put on a show. You can just show up, you can be real and avoid the pretentiousness that pervades society, and you can just grow together and help each other. And, I love learning from people. I love being encouraged by people, and I hope people can learn from me and be encouraged from me too. And so walking through this deal together is super important. And as a clinician too, one of the reasons I wrote this book is so people can have ownership of the process, because I don't think a good reason to do something is just because I'm a doctor or I have this credential, and they're beating you over the head with all their knowledge or whatever. No, it's like, hey, let's talk about why this makes sense, and then we can get there together, and if we can walk together to a better tomorrow, there's going to be a lot more buy-in, there's going to be a lot more adherence, and there's going to be a lot more joy on the journey.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I just met this adorable baby girl who we've been spending time together like over the past few weeks now, I guess a couple weeks maybe. And I see like the difference that it has made, because I'm over here in Iowa and I haven't made any like what I feel like real relationships. And I was like, man, I've been here for almost 3 years. And now that I'm ready to go, I get this young lady who is just adorable. And I'm so thankful to have her, in my life. And I do have long distance, but it's just something about that in-person person, like you were talking about your pickleball partner and your golf partner. You have to show up and just be yourself and have that accountability. And it's very important. There's a time I think where it's beneficial for you to sit with yourself, but then just having those relationships are just as important.
Oh, for sure. Two are better than one, it's Ecclesiastes, right? So, life is not meant to be a solo endeavor. And so it's a huge blessing to just have each other in our lives.
Yeah, it is. Elizabeth has another question. Can you address parasites?
Oh, parasites. I actually did have a parasite when I was 20. I had something called Entamoeba histolytica, and that's amoebic dysentery. That was a bad day. That was real bad. And so anyway, I got really sick. So anyway, that'll really ruin your life for a little bit. But anyway, so parasites on a broader level. And so what I'll say is it can happen, right? People can get a parasite, and that can obviously lead to problems. I've had a parasite that was really, really problematic for me acutely. As far as chronically, it can happen. I think it's not as common, and so sometimes you'll go to some practitioners and they'll be checking everybody for parasites. I think that for me, I'm not a parasite expert. It's not something I routinely check unless I have high clinical suspicion that you've been traveling, that your symptoms are more consistent with some sort of parasite of some kind. That's an infectious disease person that's going to be the expert on that. But what I do think is, hey, the common things, we want to make sure that we're not insulin resistant, and we want to make sure that the parasite is not from within, that your own body is resenting your chronic state of overnutrition and mounting an inflammatory response when it should not be. And so what's interesting, so don't we all have them? That's an interesting question. So what's interesting is there's a people group called the Shimane in Bolivia, and they actually have high markers of inflammation. That HSCRP that I mentioned earlier is 9.2, which anything over 2 is pretty concerning. So they're really high. But the reason why their inflammation is high is because they do have parasites, because their water supply is not clean. But those guys don't have any cardiovascular disease. Their inflammation is actually doing what it's supposed to and making sure that they don't get super, super sick all the time. So inflammation kind of depends, and so, as far as parasites go, I can't say that I have super strong opinions. That's not my area of expertise. And that's more of an infectious disease thing that I think the workup would be warranted if you were having specific symptoms. What I will say is a lot of the things that I deal with, which is cardiovascular disease, they don't have symptoms. That got plaque, get a CAC. Well, let's get a CAC. Not knowing won't make it go away if there's been a significant break-in as far as your lipid neighborhood's concerned. And so a lot of the things that I'm talking about as far as insulin resistance, as far as cardiovascular disease, they're very common and they're silent until you're having big time problems. And so that's what I like to address. As far as parasites go, that's probably going to be, probably there's some other brilliant guest out there that can go deep into the weeds on parasites for you.
So do you do telehealth?
What's interesting about that is so my day job is something called a medical science liaison. So I work for a biotech company and I do a lot of teaching is what I do. I'm not sales or anything, but I basically help clinicians help their people. And so I just go around and I talk about stuff and teach things. But I have been approved to go back into clinical practice if the right opportunity arises. And if it be the Lord's will, and I think it will be because there's been some interesting doors opened recently, some of my friends and I are looking to start a metabolic and lipid concierge telehealth-ish, something like that. And so I do envision that I will be back in clinical practice at some point. Currently, I've maintained all my licensures and things. And so when the right opportunity arises, it's going to be cool. What we're trying to do right now is make sure that although the product looks delicious, that it's not half-baked. We want to make sure that when we do unfold whatever it is that we're doing together, that it's ready to rock and done right, rather than, oh, whoops, we forgot this logistic, or because there's a lot of logistics. I'm not a big logistics guy. I love people and I love showing up and hopefully helping people add some life to their years and doing all the various diagnostics and blood work and talking about the recommendations of both lifestyle, sometimes pharmaceutical, that can result in you living a better, happier life. I love that stuff. But the logistics element, which there's a lot of it when it comes to these medical practices, that eludes me. That's why I need lots of friends. And so anyway, we're working on that, and I'll definitely be announcing that broadly if and when that occurs. And so stay tuned on that.
Yeah, you have to come back and let us know.
Yeah, for sure. And it's such a blessing to be here. And I mean, this has been a blast. It always is. So.
And you're right. Like it's important to have friends because listen, some people get jealous. Like they don't want people around them that's smarter than them. But if they're smart, they definitely want people around them that, have different expertise so that they can chime in on the logistics and chime in on this and chime in on that and be of assistance, So
all working together. We need each other. We need each other.
We really do. Oh, Elizabeth has another question. Would you say that stress is the main cause of any sickness or disease?
I'd say that insulin resistance is the primary driver of most of the chronic illnesses that we have in our Western society. Stress can contribute to you being insulin resistant, and that's not helpful. And so, but if I could pick one thing not to be, it would be insulin resistant. And so I've chosen not to be that. So that is and obviously there's lots of things that go into this, but I would say that stress, especially chronic stress that is not managed in a sustainable way, will largely contribute most of the time to insulin resistance, which then will contribute to all sorts of problems metabolically.
Awesome. Well, that answers the question that I was about to ask you. It was going to be like, if you could tell somebody that never mind, you answered the question because I can't even get it out now. It's like if you wanted someone to get one thing from this about their body, like never mind, Josh.
Yeah. Yeah. Control your insulin, control your life. I have a t-shirt that says that.
There you go. I couldn't even get it out. I was just like, you already answered the question.
It's all good.
Yeah.
It's all good.
Oh my goodness. Maybe my insulin is off and out of whack right now.
But you'll know because next time you go in for your annual wellness, you'll ask for that fasting insulin and we'll see where you're at.
We'll see where we're at. And I'm still trying to figure out how was I trying to say that? Most of the time I just ask it in a way that's like, if you could have people take one takeaway from this, maybe I should have said the way that I normally say it, but I was trying to say it a different way about the person's body. And you had already answered it, so I should have let it be.
Hey, it all works out in the end.
But we can laugh at ourselves. I remember I used to be all stressed if I made a mistake or if I stumbled over my words or whatever. But now I'm just like, I'm human. And that's what it shows. We're just being ourselves and we're making mistakes and we're rolling with it and moving forward.
For sure. Amen to that.
But I definitely stumbled over that one real bad. I think my last question, because this has been very, very informative and it's a lot of information to digest. And so I am excited about following your progress and the things that you offer because this was a lot, but who doesn't want to add years to their life? I think we all want to do that. And even though we know better, we don't always do better because it's easier to grab the bag of chips than it is to go and actually prepare something. And it's about shopping different and having a different mindset and getting around different people. Like you were saying earlier, sometimes that's all it takes is being around the right group of people. So this has been an amazing episode for me. And I wanted to ask you, I normally ask this one question. If you could tell your younger self something, what would you tell little Josh?
If I could tell my younger self something, I would probably just tell myself Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding, in all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. Because that is the story of my life. God is good. God is very patient. I have tried to run away at times, kind of like Jonah, trying to run to Spain instead of going to Nineveh. And that doesn't ever work out very well. But thankfully, he has never given up on me and has allowed me to have some really awesome opportunities and meet some amazing people along the way. So that's what I'd say.
And that is a true statement. True. We definitely have opportunities. I mean, this journey, like I didn't know before this episode that you had gotten really sick, and it kind of changes, the direction that your life goes in after you experience a sickness like that, because that's what it's been for me. I was very sick and now my life is going down a different path, and the path is to be helpful, with other people. Oh, Elizabeth says, bless you, Josh. Oh. And then she says, and you too, Celena. Bless you and Celena. All right. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. But, it does change how you move. But like your dad said, love God and love people. And so because of our love for people, we continue to show up. We continue to share our information, our knowledge, just the things about our life that we've learned along the way, and not always looking at things as a loss, but as a lesson, and taking those lessons and helping other people live a better life, live a longer life, and be in a proactive versus a reactive mode when it comes to your own life and your health and things like that.
100%.
100%. So promise me you're going to come back. Hold up your book one more time. Hold up your book one more time, Josh.
Yep. So there it is. It's the home security system and the lipid neighborhood. And there is even an audiobook, actually. So I said, Morgan Freeman, it was either Morgan Freeman or me. And for some reason he was busy. So I narrated my own book, which was an interesting experience. And so if you just sat through this and you couldn't stand me as a person or didn't like the way I talk, don't get the audiobook. But if you actually enjoyed this or think, wow, maybe we should dive into this stuff, then there's the book here. And then there's also an audiobook for you. And yeah, I think you'll have fun with it. So spread the love, spread the word. I think it's like $8 or something. So one of my goals is just to make it very affordable and accessible for both clinicians and non-clinicians so that we can hopefully live happily ever after.
Elizabeth says she's going to get several of those books for her and her friends. And when she'll tell you that's what she does, that is what she does. I have a book that she sent me supporting her good friend, and I love it. I love my book, and she definitely is a woman of her word, so you can expect to have
Awesome.
some on order.
No, I love that. No,
for all of your questions too. I love the interactiveness.
That was great. And yeah, there's been a few medical practices that have bought it in bulk for their patients and for their clinicians as well. So that's what I want, and have some fun with it and laugh a little, learn a little, and then don't have heart attacks, strokes, and dementia. So that's the whole goal.
Let's not. Yeah. And before you go, now that you say dementia, oh my goodness, like that is just really taken over so many people. I don't think I ever really noticed until now how many people are actually suffering from dementia.
Yeah, there's a big difference between living and existing, and my grandmother passed away from complications due to Alzheimer's disease. And it's tough. It's really a tough way to go. And that's the subject of my PhD work, is specifically the cholesterol disturbances that we see in Alzheimer's disease. That is a deep dive, and that will be certainly something we unpack in round 2, because it deserves its own conversation. But at the end of the day, a lot of the things that go into cardiovascular health that we've talked about today and metabolic health go into dementia prevention as well. There are just some specifically interesting wrinkles when it comes to what's going on in the brain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's sad when people don't even recognize their own loved ones, and it's a hard way to go, and then it's a hard way to see your loved one go, because they just don't even remember certain parts of their life and their loved ones, and it's very sad. So I definitely want to deep dive into that one, because it just seems like such an increase. And so how do you prevent it? What are the things that you can do that will help you not have to go down that road? And sometimes, I feel like, yes, that's what we're talking about right now. That's exactly what we're talking about right now, coming back and talking about it. Because even now, whenever I forget things, because I forget them so easily. And I'm just like, man, I just can't even imagine my life a few years down the road. And I love taking pictures and, trying to create memories, because I just feel like later in life, that's what you're going to have. And so, yeah, any light that you could shed on that, because I do have a friend right now that her husband is going through that, and she's his caretaker, and it's very hard for them to go through that. So, yeah, you definitely have an invite to come back. You have such a wealth of knowledge. I didn't even know what I was going to say, but I didn't have to say anything other than introduce you, and then that's it. Then when I decided to ask a question, I just stumbled all over it. So praise God that you just bounced right on back. I don't think I ever had anybody run to the restroom during the live, so that was funny.
Dilution's the solution to pollution. I just drank way too much water, and then I was like, oh man. So I didn't plan that well. Usually I do these shows in the morning, like podcasts. I go in the morning, and I haven't had time to drink my 1.5 gallons or something. And so that was a learning experience for me too. So anyway, but it is what it is. So
yeah, because when I talked to you last night, you're like, oh yeah, we're gonna be up in the morning, and I'm over here looking. I was like, I was pretty sure he was 7 o'clock at night.
Yeah, I was off on that. So once again, that's why we need friends, because I can't tell the difference between AM and PM. So there you go.
That's good. Elizabeth said amazing, and he is a believer. So Elizabeth, thank you so much for all of your questions and interactive. participation on tonight. Thank you all for joining. Josh, please come back. And until next time, y'all share a smile and spread some sunshine. Mwah.